You wave goodbye to your family and board a starship, but when you come home, your family has been gone for 300 years. This is the terrifying promise of the time dilation paradox. By the end of this exploration, you will understand how a law of physics could force you to become a stranger in your own future. We are going to uncover the precise science that allows time to stretch and compress, and we will walk through every step of a one-way trip into a new epoch, from the launch to the unimaginable return. What does it mean to leave your entire world behind, not in space, but in time? How would you prove who you are to your own great-great-grandchildren? Today, we confront the ultimate cost of walking among the stars. If you could step onto that ship knowing the price, would you? That world is not a fantasy, it is our universe. For thousands of years, humanity believed time was a river flowing at the same rate for everyone, everywhere. Then, in the early 20th century, a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein looked at the data and asked a different question. What if the speed of light was the true constant and time itself was the flexible element? His answer, the special theory of relativity, completely rewrote the rules of reality. It tells us that the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. This is not a mechanical effect or a trick of perception. It is a fundamental property of the fabric of the cosmos. At the heart of this idea is his most famous equation, E equals mc squared. This relationship between energy, mass, and the speed of light reveals that nothing with mass can ever reach light speed because it would require infinite energy. But as you approach that ultimate speed limit, something profound happens to time. To understand why, physicists use mathematical tools called Lorentz transformations. Think of these not as complex formulas, but as the universe's own accounting system. They calculate how measurements of time and space change for observers moving at different speeds. This introduces two key concepts. Proper time is the time measured by a clock that is moving with you, your personal experience of the journey. Coordinate time is the time measured by someone watching you from a stationary point like Earth. The stunning result is that these two clocks will never agree if you are moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The classic demonstration is the twin paradox. One twin stays on Earth while the other boards a starship and travels to a distant star at near light speed. For the traveling twin, the journey might feel like a few years. But due to time dilation, when they return, they find their Earth-bound sibling has aged decades or even centuries. This is not a paradox in the sense of a logical error. It is the confirmed, non-symmetrical reality of our universe. The twin who accelerates and changes direction to return home experiences less proper time. So, let's sit with that implication for a moment. If you knew that chasing a dream at incredible speeds would cost you not miles, but years with everyone you love, how would that calculus change your ambition? This is the precise, unforgiving physics that turns a journey across space into a voyage across epochs. With this foundation laid, we can now see how a simple trip to the stars becomes a one-way ticket to the future. That simple thought experiment with the twins reveals a universe of profound strangeness. To truly grasp the scale of the paradox, we need to look under the hood at the precise mechanics of time dilation. Let us take two perfectly synchronized, identical clocks. We place one here on Earth, and we launch the other on a rocket traveling at an immense fraction of light speed. From our perspective on Earth, we watch the rocket's clock through a powerful telescope. The seconds tick by, but they do so more slowly than the seconds on our own clock. This is not an illusion or a mechanical fault. Time itself, for that moving clock, is literally passing at a slower rate. When the rocket finally returns and we compare the clocks side by side, the one from the journey will show that less time has passed. This is the heart of special relativity, and it is governed by a deceptively simple formula. the time experienced by the moving traveler, which we call proper time, is equal to the time measured by the stationary observer divided by the square root of 1 minus the velocity squared divided by the speed of light squared. Now, that might sound like a mouthful, but its implications are breathtaking. The key is that term under the square root. As your velocity, v, gets closer and closer to the speed of light, c, the fraction v squared over c squared approaches 1. 1 minus a number very close to 1 is a very small number, and when you take the square root of a very small number, you get an even smaller number. This small number is in the denominator of our formula, which means the overall result, the gamma factor as physicists call it, becomes enormous. This gamma factor is the multiplier for time dilation. At everyday speeds like driving a car or even flying in a jet, the gamma factor is so close to 1 that the time difference is immeasurably tiny. This is why we never notice it. But the effect is real and has been measured. When astronaut Scott Kelly spent nearly a year aboard the International Space Station, he was moving at about 17,500 miles per hour relative to Earth. Due to time dilation, he actually aged about 5 milliseconds less than his identical twin brother Mark, who stayed on the ground. 5 milliseconds is a tiny sliver, but it confirms the principle. Now let us crank the speed up to where the paradox becomes stark. Imagine we aim for Proxima Centauri, the nearest star system, at about 4.2 light-years away. If our ship could travel at 90% of light speed, the gamma factor is roughly 2.3. For the crew on that ship, the trip to Proxima Centauri and back would feel like around 9.3 years. But back on Earth, because of that multiplier, over 21 years would have passed. The crew returns to an Earth that has moved on without them for more than 2 decades. This is the symmetrical strangeness. From the crew's frame of reference, it was Earth that was moving away at high speed, so they should see Earth's clocks running slow. This apparent contradiction is resolved by the fact that the crew's journey is not symmetrical. To turn around and come home, the ship must accelerate, changing its velocity. This acceleration breaks the symmetry and confirms that the traveling twin, the one who felt the forces of acceleration, is the one who experiences less time. So what does this mean for our concept of now? There is no universal present moment that everyone shares. Your now and my now are only the same if we are not moving relative to each other. The moment you begin to move at a significant fraction of light speed, your timeline peels away from mine. This mechanical reality transforms a journey across space into a one-way trip through time. But the true weight of this voyage is not felt in the equations, it is felt in the silence of an empty homecoming. The equations are clear, but their human cost remains an abstraction. To feel that cost, we must build the ship. Let us design a mission not to the nearest star, but to a potential new home. Our target is Tau Ceti, a sun-like star just over 12 light-years away. Our vessel is the Pilgrim, a generation ship built not for a quick survey, but for a permanent voyage. Its propulsion is a matter-antimatter drive, harnessing the most efficient reaction known to physics to propel it to 99% of light speed. The energy requirement is astronomical, consuming the equivalent of entire planetary economies for decades just to fuel the acceleration phase alone. The ship itself is a spinning cylinder miles long, creating artificial gravity within its living quarters. Its hull is layered with meters of water and advanced composites to shield the crew from the deadly hail of cosmic radiation and interstellar dust, each particle a potential bullet at such velocities. You are selected for the crew. The selection process seeks not just experts in botany, engineering, and medicine, but individuals with profound psychological resilience. You undergo years of training not merely in your technical field, but in coping with the knowledge that you are leaving your century behind. You say your final goodbyes through a video link, the delay already a tangible reminder of the growing gulf. Launch day arrives, the Pilgrim's engines ignite, a silent fury in the vacuum, and you are pressed into your seat as the ship begins its long acceleration. For you and your crewmates, life settles into a routine. You tend the hydroponic farms, maintain the ship's systems, study, and form a close-knit community. Years pass subjectively. You celebrate birthdays, mourn the passing of an older crew member from natural causes, and watch children born on the mission grow up knowing only the metal walls and star-filled view screens as home. This is where the paradox splits reality. In your reference frame, the ship's frame, time feels normal. The journey to Tau Ceti, traveling at 99% of light speed, takes just over 12 years of your life. But through the Lorentz transformations, the gamma factor at this velocity is about 7. For every year that passes for you, 7 years pass on Earth. Your 12-year journey is, from Earth's perspective, an 84-year voyage. By the time you are halfway to your destination, everyone you knew as a young adult on Earth has likely reached the end of their natural lives. By the time you arrive at Tau Ceti, your grandchildren back on Earth would be elderly. A one-way transmission from Earth, sent when you were 40, would take 12 years to reach you, by which time you would be 52, hearing the voice of a loved one frozen in a past you can never return to. Aerospace engineers like Dr. Harold Sonny White speak of the monumental technological hurdles, the need for breakthroughs in energy containment and materials science that we can barely envision today. The Pilgrim is a thought experiment, a blueprint that makes the paradox concrete. It asks a devastatingly simple question: would you volunteer to be a founder of a new human future if the price was becoming a living relic of a world that has moved on without you? Your mission is a success the moment you leave Earth's orbit, for you have already traveled to the future. The destination star is almost secondary. The true journey is through time. And this leads us to the most haunting part of the paradox, the moment the mathematics of motion collide with the archaeology of memory. What do you actually find when you finally turn around and come home? The launch is a spectacle of light and hope, a triumph of collective human will, but in the silence after the engines fade, a different reality settles over mission control. The scientists and engineers who built the Pilgrim have just sent their creation and their colleagues on a one-way trip to the future. The initial data stream is strong, showing the ship accelerating smoothly, its systems nominal. For the first few years, communication is almost routine, a complex interstellar pen-pal system. A question about a system diagnostic takes a month to reach the ship, and the crew's answer takes another month to return. A simple greeting carries a 2-month-old echo, but as the Pilgrim's velocity climbs and its distance stretches, the lag grows from months to years. A child born on Earth the day after launch will be in school by the time the ship's confirmation of a successful mid-course correction finally arrives. This is the Earthbound perspective, a Vigil measured in generations. The mission becomes a thread woven into the fabric of history, but the fabric itself is changing. The world that launched the Pilgrim begins to transform. New technologies emerge, political borders shift, languages evolve, and social values are reinterpreted. The team that designed the communication protocols retires, then passes on. Their children take up the watch, maintaining the massive antenna arrays, decoding the increasingly delayed telemetry. But the content of those messages becomes a kind of archaeology. The crew reports on events that, for Earth, are decades in the past. They reference cultural touchstones, slang, and perspectives that have long since faded from memory. The ship becomes a time capsule, carrying a snapshot of a civilization frozen at the moment of launch. To manage this, long-term institutions are founded. Trusts are endowed, and sophisticated artificial intelligence systems are tasked as stewards, designed to monitor the signal for centuries, preserving the dialogue. Yet the chasm widens. Imagine the family of the chief engineer, Her daughter grows up proud of her mother's legacy, eagerly awaiting each new transmission. Her granddaughter studies the mission in history class, a famous event from the previous century. Her great-granddaughter sees it as a romantic, almost mythical endeavor from a distant, technologically primitive age. By the time the Pilgrim is due to approach Tau Ceti, the engineer's great-great-grandchild is an adult living in a world the crew could not possibly recognize. They receive an automated alert that the ship has begun its deceleration burn, an event that actually occurred 12 years prior. The signal itself is an artifact. Historians of this future might debate the mission's true purpose. Was it a bold act of exploration or a poignant act of cultural preservation, sending a fragment of their past to the stars? Sociologists would note how the very concept of such a sacrifice reflects the values of the launching era, values that may seem noble or naive to future generations. The Earth story is one of relentless, accelerating change, while the ship's internal culture, isolated and focused on survival, likely changes at a glacial pace. This creates a profound asymmetry. The crew left a vibrant, familiar world, but they are destined to return as living fossils to a planet of strangers. Their technical manuals are obsolete, their social instincts are mismatched, their very language may sound archaic. The connection maintained through centuries of data packets cannot transmit the lived experience of cultural evolution. How do you explain the feeling of a new era to someone who missed its entire gestation? The Earth's vigil is a slow letting go, a realization that they are not waiting for travelers to return, but for echoes from their own past to finally fade. This sets the stage for the most disorienting phase of all, when the long silence is broken and the ship finally turns its nose toward home. The ship's hull becomes the entire universe for those inside. For the crew of the Pilgrim, the relentless acceleration fades into a steady state of artificial gravity, and life condenses into a rhythm of shifts, meals, and maintenance. This is the subjective heart of the journey, where decades of ship time pass in a tightly bound community, a world of fluorescent light and recycled air hurtling through the void. Their social structure is meticulously designed, blending professional hierarchy with communal interdependence. There are no passengers, only crew, each person trained in multiple disciplines. The botanist is also a medic, the engineer also teaches history. This cross-training is not just practical, it is psychological, weaving everyone into a web of mutual necessity and respect. Psychologists who study teams in extreme isolation, from Antarctic research stations to deep-sea submarines, provide a blueprint for this society. They note that clear, shared goals are the strongest glue against conflict. On the Pilgrim, the goal is survival and mission success, a purpose that touches every task from recalibrating a sensor to tending the aeroponic farms. These farms are technological marvels, vertical forests under precise LED suns, where every gram of water and nutrient is reclaimed and recycled. The ship's life support is a closed-loop ecosystem, a fragile bubble of Earth biology that must remain perfectly balanced for generations. Waste is processed into fertilizer, carbon dioxide is scrubbed by genetically modified algae, and water is purified through a cascade of filters and distillation. It is a perpetual dance of chemistry and biology, monitored by thousands of sensors. To preserve sanity across the years, the crew cultivates a rich internal culture. They mark time not by Earth seasons but by ship cycles. A year might be measured by one complete revolution around their destination star, a milestone celebrated with a festival of music and shared stories from the digital archive. This archive is their most precious cargo, a vast library of Earth's art, literature, and family recordings, accessed through immersive virtual reality suites. Here, a crew member can walk through a forest of their childhood or sit at a familiar kitchen table, a bittersweet technology for memory preservation that is both a comfort and a potential source of profound melancholy. Children born on the journey, known as ship generation, know no other reality. Their nursery rhymes are about constellations and system diagnostics. Their education is a blend of standard curriculum and vital hands-on training in the ship's systems. They inherit the mission not as a choice but as their birthright, their identity inextricably linked to the metal walls around them. An illustrative career path might follow a woman named Ilara. She joins the crew as a young exogeologist, excited for the adventure. Over the ship's decades, she falls in love, raises a child, loses friends to age or accident, and gradually becomes one of the ship's elder counselors. Her expertise evolves from analyzing rock samples to mediating disputes and interpreting the fading cultural context of Earth's transmissions. She becomes a living bridge between the mission's origin and its unknown end. This raises a profound reflective question. What unique society evolves under such constraints? Without new stimuli from an outside world, cultural drift is inevitable. Traditions mutate, language simplifies or develops new slang specific to ship life, and social norms adapt to the unchangeable fact of perpetual proximity. Crises are managed not by calling for help, but by relying on the deep, hard-earned trust within the group. The ship becomes a miniature world with its own accelerating history, a history that is diverging from Earth's with every passing subjective year. While the crew lives a life of familiar routine, a relentless, silent transformation is occurring just outside their hull, in the relationship between their moving clock and the rest of the cosmos. This divergence sets the stage for the most complex maneuver of the entire voyage, the moment they must confront the universe's ledger and pay the toll for their speed. The long silence of the coasting phase is shattered by the deep, resonant thrum of the engines reigniting. For the crew of the Pilgrim, this is the moment they have prepared for across a lifetime. The deceleration burn is a mirror of their departure, a force pressing them forward into their restraints as the ship begins the years-long process of slowing down to enter the Tau Ceti system. Yet, even as they focus on the complex ballet of orbital insertion, their instruments are turned back toward the tiny, pale blue dot they once called home. What they detect first is not a welcome but a cacophony. The radio spectrum, once a carefully managed set of familiar frequencies, is now a dense, roaring symphony of signals. Their computers, running translation algorithms centuries out of date, struggle to find patterns in the noise. They isolate what seem to be news broadcasts, entertainment streams, and data traffic, but the languages have evolved into dialects they can barely parse. The very structure of the communication protocols is alien, encrypted and layered in ways their antique systems cannot comprehend. The first clear image of Earth from a distance confirms the transformation. The planet is wrapped in a glittering necklace of orbital infrastructure, massive solar power stations, rotating habitats that look like spinning wheels of silver, and traffic patterns of vessels that move with a precision and speed their own ship cannot match. The familiar continents are now traced with lights in patterns they do not recognize, vast urban regions where there were once forests or seas. Geographically, it is home. Culturally, it is an entirely new world. Anthropologists have a term for the disorientation they feel, future shock, but this is beyond any case study. This is the shock of an entire civilization, experienced by a handful of people who left it behind. The awe of seeing humanity's expanded presence in space is immediately undercut by a terrifying loneliness. They are strangers arriving at the doorstep of their own legacy. The technical challenges are immense. Approaching Earth space, they are met not by a simple mission control, but by a complex web of automated traffic control systems. Their ship's transponder, broadcasting an identification code from a bygone era, triggers a series of layered authentication requests from orbital authorities speaking in a clipped, efficient technical jargon. Docking with a modern station requires them to accept remote piloting, surrendering control of their vessel to an artificial intelligence that understands the intricate dance of this new orbital environment. The process is smooth, but it is a stark reminder that their technology is now a museum piece. Upon securing the airlock, they do not step out into a crowd of cheering well-wishers. The first contact is a meticulous, sterile procedure. They are met by a combined team of diplomats, historians, and medical personnel in sleek, minimalist environmental suits. Communication is mediated through real-time translation nodes worn by the Earth representatives, small devices that render their archaic speech into contemporary language and vice versa. The first video call with the official Earth liaison is a moment of profound surrealism. The face on the screen is friendly, professional, but the fashion, the hairstyle, even the subtle micro-expressions and cultural references in their speech belong to a future the crew can only observe as outsiders. They are shown images of the world they left, their neighborhoods, their cities now preserved only in historical archives, some submerged, others transformed beyond recognition. The medical quarantine is not just biological, it is informational. The crew is debriefed in stages, their memories and personal logs treated as priceless primary sources from a lost epoch. Historians gently ask them to confirm or clarify events that have long since solidified into legend or textbook summaries. The most haunting question hangs unspoken in the air. How do you prove you are who you say you are? Their DNA can be matched to genealogical records, their ship's logs can be authenticated, but their lived experience is a story that seems impossible. To their hosts, they are not returning heroes, they are living artifacts, a breathing snapshot of an age of daring and sacrifice that current society may view with a mix of reverence and pity. The return is not a homecoming, it is a first contact scenario where the alien civilization is your own. The airlock opens, and the first true conversation begins with a simple, devastating misunderstanding. A crew member offers a handshake, a gesture they believe to be universal. The Earth liaison hesitates for a fraction of a second before reciprocating, a micro-expression of confusion that speaks volumes. The gesture, it turns out, has fallen out of common use in this future, replaced by a subtle nod or a brief palm-to-chest greeting. This is the first crack in the cultural foundation, a sign that every interaction will be an act of translation far beyond words. The crew speaks what they believe is English, but to the ears of their descendants, it sounds like a thick, archaic dialect, peppered with strange idioms and references to historical figures and events that are no longer common knowledge. The word cool to describe something impressive draws polite, blank stares. A joke about dial-up internet or a forgotten political scandal lands in utter silence, its cultural context completely lost. Linguist John McWhorter notes that language is not a static artifact but a living river, constantly changing course. Over 3 centuries, semantic drift ensures that words evolve, gaining new meanings and shedding old ones. A simple word like awful once meant full of awe, inspiring wonder. For the crew, it means very bad. For their hosts, it might have shifted again entirely. This creates a minefield of potential offense where none is intended. The crew's attempts at formality may sound comically stiff, their casual speech bizarrely poetic. Their humor, rooted in the sensibilities and shared traumas of their launch era, does not translate. A sarcastic remark is taken at face value. A witty pun is heard as a simple statement of fact. The shared history that forms the bedrock of any culture is completely misaligned. For the crew, events like the first Mars landing or a specific global health challenge are vivid, personal memories. For the people of this future, they are distant, sanitized entries in a historical database, stripped of emotional weight and societal nuance. The crew's stories are not heard as lived experience, but as data points to be catalogued. In one poignant instance, a crew member tries to explain the concept of a popular 21st century meme, a cartoon frog used for political satire. They describe the image, the context, the feeling it evoked. The historians listen intently, record the explanation, and thank them for the insight into early digital tribal signaling. The humor, the rebellion, the specific cultural moment that gave it life is gone. It is an archaeological specimen under glass. To bridge this chasm, communication relies on sophisticated artificial intelligence. The crew wears discrete earpieces that provide near real-time translation, not just of vocabulary, but of inferred intent and cultural subtext. The AI scans facial expressions, vocal tone, and historical databases to whisper context. It might suggest they are using a formal honorific from your era, respond in kind, or that reference to oceanic cities is considered nostalgic, not controversial. This turns every conversation into a mediated performance, exhausting and isolating. The crew becomes acutely aware that they are being studied. Their speech patterns, their turns of phrase, their very anecdotes are recorded and analyzed by teams of sociolinguists. Their language is treated as a precious historical artifact, a direct audio recording of a lost vernacular. They are living primary sources, a walking, talking Rosetta Stone for their own civilization. This creates an ethical tightrope. The historians are desperate for unfiltered accounts, but every story the crew tells, every opinion they voice, is a piece of cultural data from the past introduced into the present. Could a description of their era's social conflicts inadvertently influence contemporary debates? Does sharing their personal faith or lack thereof constitute cultural contamination? The future society must decide whether to quarantine their perspectives as historical data or engage with them as contemporary voices, a dilemma with no clear answer. This forces a painful reflection. Your cultural identity is woven from the music, the news, the slang, and the shared struggles of your time. Can that identity survive when transplanted to a soil where none of those roots exist? You are left with a haunting realization. You did not just travel through space. You have become a ghost, haunting a future that speaks a language you only half understand, in a home that remembers your name but has forgotten your heart. The handshake was only the first in a cascade of small, daily heartbreaks. The grief that settles over the returning crew is profound, yet strangely diffuse. It is not the sharp pain of losing a single person, which has a name and a face, but a deep, aching sorrow for an entire world that has simply vanished. Their home, their culture, their moment in history, all of it is gone, preserved only in their own memories and in the sterile pages of an archive. Psychologists studying this would see it as a unique form of compounded nostalgia, mixed with a complete dissolution of identity. You are not who you thought you were because the society that defined you no longer exists. In existing studies of refugees or survivors of catastrophic events, we see parallels, the loss of a shared social fabric, the feeling of being unmoored. But here there is no homeland to return to, no physical ruins to mourn. The past they long for is perfectly intact in their minds, yet utterly inaccessible in reality. This creates a condition some theorists call temporal displacement syndrome, the experience of being a time refugee. Your internal clock, your cultural rhythms, your sense of what is normal are all calibrated to a timeline that is not this one. Science fiction writers like Arthur C. Clarke and Ursula K. Le Guin have long explored this terrain not as fantasy, but as a profound meditation on what it means to be human when your context is stripped away. They understood that the greatest challenge might not be the stars, but the self you bring back. For the crew, every interaction reinforces their status as an anomaly. They are celebrities, but in the way a rare archaeological find is celebrated, poked, prodded, and displayed for study. The pressure is relentless. A simple trip to a public space becomes an event, with people discreetly recording them, analyzing their clothing, their gait, their every word for historical significance. The risk of severe depression and alienation is immense. How do you find purpose when your life's great mission is over and you are now a living exhibit in its museum? Therapeutic approaches must be as innovative as the ship that brought them here. One method involves creating period-accurate virtual environments. Using the ship's archives and the crew's own memories, therapists construct immersive simulations of their lost era, a park from their hometown, a bustling market street, a familiar cafe. These are not escapes but controlled spaces for grief, allowing them to say a proper goodbye to the sensory details of a world that is gone. The goal is not to live in the simulation, but to process the loss within it. Alongside this, integrative therapy focuses on building a new identity. Counselors work with them to translate their skills and values into terms this new world understands. The botanist who maintained the ship's life support for decades might find purpose in advising on closed-loop ecosystems for new orbital habitats. The engineer becomes a teacher, explaining the elegant, analog solutions of a past technological age to students who think in quantum code. The aim is to help them move from being relics of the past to participants in the present. Consider one returnee, let us call him Leo. He was the Pilgrim's communications officer, a master of the complex radio protocols of his time. In this future, his expertise is obsolete, a curious footnote. He tries to connect with people, but conversations are polite and distant. When he speaks of the static hiss of interstellar space or the anxiety of waiting for a year's delayed reply from Earth, his listeners nod with academic interest, not shared feeling. They cannot comprehend the weight of that silence. He is invited to give lectures, but the questions afterward are about historical technical specifications, never about the loneliness he felt. To form a genuine friendship, he must first teach someone the entire emotional language of his extinct world, a task as daunting as learning to breathe a different atmosphere. So we must ask, what is the true psychological price of stepping outside the river of time? Your memories become a private museum no one else can visit. Your triumphs and regrets are written in a dialect no one speaks. Your mind remains a perfect, vibrant archive of a past era, but you are living in a library that has catalogued that era and moved its collections to the basement. The challenge is not just to survive the return, but to find a way to write a new chapter in a story you thought was finished. And this struggle with the past inevitably forces a confrontation with the most fundamental question of all, the one that has been hovering since launch day. What does your sacrifice mean to the future you helped create? Does it see you as a founder or merely as a fascinating artifact? The psychological isolation is mirrored by a profound legal limbo. You left Earth a citizen of a sovereign nation, bound by its laws and protected by its rights. You return to find that nation is a footnote in history, its borders redrawn, its legal code archived, its very concept of sovereignty replaced by planetary or stellar unions. Your passport is a beautiful, antique document, but it grants you entry to a country that no longer exists. This is not a bureaucratic oversight. It is a fundamental rupture in the concept of legal personhood. Are you still a citizen of anything? Legal scholars who theorize about deep time and space law grapple with this under the term chronological sovereignty, the idea that a government's authority extends through time as well as space. Does that authority stretch 300 years to claim you, or did you, by traveling outside the common timeline, effectively become a legal entity without a state, a temporal person? There are faint precedents we can examine, though none at this scale. Consider the legal status of individuals placed in cryonic suspension. They exist in a state between life and legal death, their assets held in trust, their future reactivation a hypothetical that trusts and courts must plan for. Now amplify that 1,000-fold. or consider a missing person declared dead after a prolonged absence. If they were to return, the law has provisions for reinstating their status, but those provisions assume a return within a single, continuous timeline, not after centuries of compounded interest and societal change. For the returnees, every legal document they ever signed, their will, their property deeds, their marriage license, exists in a context that has evaporated. An illustrative case makes this concrete. Imagine a crew member named Cale. Before launch, a prudent and wealthy individual, he placed his assets into a perpetual trust managed by an AI trustee, with instructions to preserve and grow the capital for his eventual return or for his designated heirs after a declared period of absence. Over 3 centuries, through compound growth and seismic economic shifts, that trust has become a vast, labyrinthine financial entity. Cale now stands before a contemporary court, a man physically in his 60s arguing for control of a fortune administered under laws written 250 years after he last drew breath. The opposing counsel does not dispute his biometric identity. They argue a more philosophical point. The Cale who created that trust was a legal person of the 21st century. The man before them is a temporal anomaly, a person from the past inhabiting the present. Does the original legal intent, they ask, bind a society that has fundamentally redefined concepts of property, currency, and even personhood? The trust's AI, following its original programming to the letter, might recognize him, but the judicial system overseeing that AI may not. The proceedings would delve into the deepest questions of law. Is identity continuous across a gulf of time this vast? Or does a person's legal self have an expiration date, a statute of limitations on their own existence? Beyond personal wealth, their intellectual property poses another puzzle. Did a crew member's pre-flight research, long since entered into the public domain and built upon by generations, suddenly regain protection upon their return? The potential for chaos is immense. To navigate this, future jurists might create a new legal category, the chronologically displaced person. This status would not automatically grant citizenship or ownership, but it would provide a structured pathway for adjudication. A special tribunal, blending historians, ethicists, and judges, would be convened. Its task would not be to apply old law or new law rigidly, but to seek equitable translation, to interpret the spirit of past agreements within the reality of the present. It would be less a courtroom and more a diplomatic negotiation between epochs. For Cale, the outcome might not be full control of his ancestral trust, but perhaps a generous stipend drawn from it, a settlement that acknowledges his historical contribution without destabilizing contemporary economic systems. This legal purgatory forces a haunting reflection. Your signature once had power. It could buy land, promise love, or dictate the distribution of your life's work. But what is the lifespan of a promise? If the world that witnessed your promise vanishes, does the promise itself dissolve? You must now prove not just who you are, but that you still has any legal standing in a world that has written its laws in a language of time you did not help draft. This bureaucratic maze, this fight for the right to your own name and legacy, becomes the final, crushing evidence that you are a visitor in your own future. And it raises an inevitable, monumental question for the society that greets you. Are you a citizen to be integrated or a claimant to be settled? The legal battle for your own identity is only the prelude to a far more profound disorientation. You left a world where intelligence was a biological trait, locked inside fragile skulls of bone. You return to a civilization that may have redefined the very concept of mind. The technological singularity, a hypothetical future point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence and triggers an explosion of progress, is not just a theory for your hosts. It is their history. Your ship's departure from a world of smartphones and narrow artificial intelligence is to them akin to the dawn of the steam engine. The gap is not merely technological, it is existential. Futurist Ray Kurzweil popularized the idea of this accelerating change, charting a curve where each century of progress is compressed into decades, then years. For the crew, this curve was a line on a graph. For the society that greets them, it is the water they swim in. The technologies they encounter defy their framework of understanding. Nanotechnology might be so advanced it is ambient, with microscopic machines in the air and soil performing environmental maintenance, healing structures, and even composing art in real time. A crumbling wall simply repairs itself grain by grain as they watch. What they would call magic is merely infrastructure. Consider the nature of citizenship itself. The individuals they meet may not be biological humans as they understand them. A person might be an uploaded consciousness, a pattern of thought existing in a distributed planetary data network, occasionally inhabiting a synthetic body for sensory experience or to interact with the physical world. To speak with such an entity is not a conversation with a single mind in a single place. It is an audience with a presence that is everywhere and nowhere at once, its attention vast and multifaceted. How do you read the face of someone who can choose their face? How do you gauge trust without the biological cues of pulse or pupil dilation? Direct brain-computer interfaces have likely evolved beyond crude implants. Thought itself may be the primary interface for commerce, art, and communication. For the crew, raised on spoken language and tactile screens, this is a silent, terrifying world. Their hosts communicate in a blur of shared concepts, emotional textures, and data streams exchanged in an instant. Our returning crew member, trying to order a meal or ask for directions, must do so through a clumsy vocal translation layer, marking them instantly as a primitive, a child struggling to form syllables in a world of telepathy. The knowledge gap is an abyss. Their training in Newtonian physics, conventional engineering, and even relativity is not just outdated, it is the foundational kindergarten of this new science. To understand the principles behind the gravity-less public transports or the matter synthesizers that create objects from ambient energy, they must first unlearn intuitive truths about their universe. Learning is no longer a matter of study but of cognitive upgrade. They may be offered neural tutoring, a process that feels like having knowledge dreamt directly into their mind, a profoundly alien and potentially violating experience for a psyche from an era of books and hard-won skill. How does this post-human society view them? The perspectives are as varied as the entities within it. To some, they are precious originals, living fossils of a purer, unaugmented consciousness. Their struggles with emotion, their linear thinking, their biological limitations are seen as charming artifacts, to be preserved and studied like a hand-woven tapestry. To others, they are dangerously unstable contaminants. Their biological pathogens are easily neutralized, but what about their ideological pathogens? The crew carries the cultural memes of a pre-singularity world, concepts like individual sovereignty, mortality, and scarcity-based economics. In a society of shared consciousness and post-scarcity, such ideas could be seen as viral, capable of causing disruptive philosophical infections. An illustrative encounter makes this tangible. Leo, the former communications officer, is invited to an artistic exhibition. He enters a space that appears to be a sun-drenched forest glade. A citizen greets him, their forms shimmering slightly, a suggestion of a person woven from light and sound. The citizen explains the art is a collaborative thought stream, experienced by thousands simultaneously, exploring the emotional legacy of Earth's biosphere. Leo sees only trees and feels only confusion. He asks how it was made. The citizen responds not with words but by gently opening a data stream. For a split second, Leo's neural translator overloads. He perceives not a process but the raw, overwhelming sensation of collective creation, a symphony of intent from minds he cannot number. He staggers back, physically nauseated. The citizen, perceiving his distress, politely withdraws the connection, their digital expression one of gentle pity. In that moment, Leo is not a pioneer. He is a museum piece, unable to comprehend the masterpiece before him. This forces the ultimate reflective question. What does it mean to be human when you are a relic of its earlier, unaugmented form? Your memories, your loves, your very consciousness are products of a slow, biological evolution. You return to find that humanity has, in a sense, speciated. It has taken its own intelligence in hand and sculpted it into new forms. The gap you must cross is not a span of years, but an evolutionary chasm. You are the Australopithecus staring up at the Starship. Only the Starship is the future of your own kind. Your sacrifice ensured their existence, but can you ever be part of it? Or are you forever a visitor from the distant past, admiring a future you are fundamentally unequipped to inhabit? Your body is a living relic, perfectly preserved from another age. While 3 centuries of human evolution, medicine, and disease unfolded on Earth, you aged only a few decades in the protective bubble of your ship. This creates a profound biological dichotomy. You are not just a visitor from the past in mind and law, but in your very cells. Your immune system is a museum of defenses, calibrated to fight the pathogens of your era, utterly naive to the microbial landscape of this new future. The common cold virus you might carry has not circulated for hundreds of years, and the strains prevalent now have evolved into forms your body has never seen. This cuts both ways, a two-way street of potential infection called temporal contagion. To the future's epidemiologists, you and your crew are a walking archive of ancient microbiomes, the unique colony of bacteria that lived in your gut and on your skin, shaped by your ship's recycled environment and diet. Introducing that unique biome to Earth's current ecosystem is a risk they cannot calculate. Conversely, a simple flu in this era could be catastrophic for you, as your immune system lacks the generational memory to mount an effective defense. The protocols for your arrival are therefore medical before they are diplomatic. Your initial greeting by personnel in environmental suits was not merely ceremonial. It was a strict biological containment measure. You will spend your first months, perhaps years, in a state-of-the-art quarantine facility that is less a prison and more a reverse clean room. Here, the outside world is kept from you, and you are kept from it, while a team of geneticists and immunologists works tirelessly to bridge the gap. They will sequence your entire genome, not for identity, but for insight. Your DNA is a snapshot of 21st century humanity, free from centuries of subtle genetic drift, environmental adaptations, and deliberate gene edits that may have become standard. To scientists, you are a priceless control group, a baseline of pure ancestral humanity. This presents an immediate ethical dilemma. Are you a patient or are you a specimen? The medical team must balance your right to privacy and bodily autonomy with a historic opportunity to study human biology before a singularity of self-modification. The line between care and research becomes uncomfortably thin. The treatment itself would be a fusion of advanced virology and nanotechnology. To protect you, you would likely receive a series of tailored gene therapies. These are not injections in the traditional sense, but sophisticated viral vectors designed to edit your immune cells, providing them with the genetic blueprints to recognize and combat contemporary pathogens. It is like giving your body's defenses a library of enemy schematics it never had the chance to collect. For the future's protection, your own microbiome might be gradually replaced or supplemented in a controlled process, introducing modern, benign bacteria to outcompete and displace your ancient ship-borne strains. The goal is a careful, managed integration, allowing your biology to catch up to the present day without being overwhelmed. This medical intervention extends beyond mere protection. The future likely possesses technologies for age mitigation or even rejuvenation. Telomeres, the protective caps on your chromosomes that shorten with age, could be extended. Cellular damage from decades of cosmic radiation exposure, even within the ship's shields, could be repaired at the molecular level. You might be offered treatments that not only ensure your health but could reverse some signs of aging, granting you a biological vitality that matches your subjective middle age. Yet this choice is not simple. To accept such enhancements is to alter the very body that carried you across the stars, to make a fundamental concession that your natural state is insufficient for this new world. For some crew members, this could feel like a final, irreversible surrender of their original identity. Consider a specific moment. A crew member, let us say Ilara, develops a respiratory infection, a simple cough and fever by her understanding. The future doctor, a gentle specialist in temporal medicine, diagnoses it as a benign but novel rhinovirus strain. The treatment proposed is a cloud of medical nanobots, microscopic machines programmed to seek out and dismantle the viral particles in her lungs. To the doctor, this is standard, elegant medicine. To Ilara, who remembers antibiotics and bed rest, the idea of tiny machines swimming inside her body is the stuff of horror. She must confront a visceral fear, not of the disease but of the cure. Her trust in her own physical boundaries is challenged. Is her body still her own if its defense is outsourced to a swarm of invisible robots? This moment crystallizes the entire dilemma. Your physical self is the one constant you have carried from your past. It is the vessel of all your memories. Now, to survive in this future, it may need to be retrofitted with technology that feels alien. You are asked to upgrade the very platform of your consciousness. So we must ask, when you look in the mirror, who do you see? The pioneer who endured the voyage, or a biological artifact awaiting an update? Your body has become a bridge between epochs, and crossing it may require leaving part of your original self behind. The final medical scans are clear, and the airlock to the outside world opens for good. You step onto a surface that is, technically, Earth, but the ground beneath your feet tells a different story. The planet has been remodeled. Centuries of intentional geoengineering, climate adaptation, and relentless urban evolution have sculpted a world that is geographically familiar yet ecologically alien. The coastlines are the first shock. Where your memory holds a detailed map of bays and peninsulas, you now see smooth, engineered curves. Vast tracts of what were low-lying countries are now protected by shimmering, semi-transparent seawalls that rise like gentle cliffs, their surfaces humming with the quiet energy of tidal generators. Other areas have been surrendered to the ocean, transformed into shallow, vibrant marine parks where the ruins of ancient skyscrapers provide artificial reefs, draped in neon-colored corals genetically adapted to warmer waters. The polar ice caps, those fragile white sentinels of your era, are permanently diminished. The Arctic is a navigable blue sea for much of the year, dotted with floating research cities that look like geometric lilies. Antarctica's coastline is a dramatic patchwork of exposed black rock and resilient new tundra, with vast interior preserves maintained at cryogenic temperatures to safeguard the ancient ice that remains. Climate modelers from your time projected these shifts, but seeing them renders the data visceral. The planet's climate has not been restored to an old ideal, but stabilized into a new, managed norm. A lattice of orbital sunshades and atmospheric aerosol dispersers, visible as a faint, pearly web in the twilight sky, carefully regulates solar intake. The weather patterns feel deliberate, the storms less frequent but more precisely channeled to feed reservoir networks. The great natural wonders you knew are transformed. The Amazon is no longer a contiguous blanket of green. It is a mosaic, a breathtaking patchwork of core wilderness biospheres the size of small nations, linked by wide, rewilded corridors and surrounded by vertical agriculture spires that produce food for the hemisphere. From orbit, it looks like a living circuit board. The Great Barrier Reef, having survived its near death, is now a hybrid masterpiece. Its bleached skeletons form the foundation for a riot of new, engineered polyps that glow with bioluminescent markers, a thriving ecosystem that is both a memorial and a radical reinvention. For the crew, this is a profound geological disorientation. A geologist on your team, let us call her Anya, was an expert in 21st century glacial retreat. She now stares at satellite images of the Greenland ice sheet, her life's work now a historical case study in a process long since concluded. Her expertise on past processes is invaluable, but the land itself has moved on. The emotional impact is deeply personal. Using an augmented reality overlay, you project the street map of your hometown onto the landscape before you. You follow ghost streets with your finger. Your childhood home sits under 300 feet of water, part of a designated marine archaeological zone. Your high school is the central courtyard of a massive arcology, a self-contained vertical city that houses 200,000 people. The park where you had your first kiss is now a nanotech forestry reserve, where trees grow in crystalline, geometric patterns for optimal carbon sequestration. You are not just a stranger in your own future, you are a ghost in your own past. The very soil has forgotten you. Yet, in this disorientation lies your crew's most unexpected and priceless value. You are not just visitors, you are living baseline data. Your memories, your biological samples, even the pollen spores trapped in the seals of your ship's storage lockers, constitute a perfect environmental snapshot of Earth circa your launch. Climate scientists of this future have incredibly precise models, but you are the control group. By studying your physiology, your gut bacteria, and your memories of seasonal allergies, they can calibrate their understanding of 3 centuries of atmospheric and ecological change with unprecedented accuracy. You become a key to measuring their own planet's journey. This reframes your entire presence. The loss of your personal landmarks is a profound grief, but it is balanced by a staggering responsibility. You are the eyewitness to the before, standing in the after. Your testimony helps this future understand not just what they have gained or built, but what was truly lost along the way. So what is home when the land has changed? It is no longer a place on a map. It becomes a story you carry, a data point in a planetary history, and a new, fragile hope that your memory of a greener, wilder Earth might help its stewards remember what they are ultimately protecting. The land has changed, but the deeper fracture is within your own mind. You carry a continuous thread of consciousness from a world that no longer exists, and this forces a confrontation with the most fundamental questions of all. What actually makes you you across such a gulf? Philosopher Derek Parfit proposed a radical idea. Personal identity is not a single, unchanging self, but a chain of connected psychological states, like a series of overlapping memories and intentions. Under this view, you are not a solid thing, but a process. For the returning crew, this theory becomes a lived, haunting reality. Your chain of memories is unbroken, stretching back to launch day. But the world that formed those memories is gone. So are you still the same person who left, or has the rupture in your context created a new psychological entity, a person from the past trapped in a present body? The tension is between 2 experiences of time. In philosophy, the series is time as we feel it, a flowing river from past to future, full of becoming and memory. This is the crew's internal reality. The B series is time as physics often describes it, a static block where all moments, past, present, and future, equally exist. Relativity, with its proof that now is relative, leans toward this block universe view. The paradox makes both views feel true at once, creating a profound existential dissonance. Your memories are not just recollections, they are the only living, breathing record of your era. In a very real sense, for everyone else, that past is a closed book, a set of data points. For you, it is the vivid, sensory reality of your life. This gives your memories a strange philosophical weight. They are not just personal, they are the last flickering light of a particular now. Consider a thought experiment posed by this very scenario. Suppose that, a century after you left, scientists on Earth, using advanced archaeogenetics and historical records, created a perfect biological clone of you. They then implanted it with a flawless copy of all your known memories up to the moment of launch. This clone lives out a life on Earth, believing itself to be you, mourning your loss, growing old in the world you left behind. Then you return. Both of you share the same memories up to a point. Both have a continuous, subjective experience of being you. So who is the real one? Our instinct is to point to the original, the one who made the journey. But if identity is just the chain of psychological connectedness, the clone has an equal claim. This experiment reveals that we anchor our sense of self not just in memory, but in a unique position within the timeline, a specific path through the block universe that we thought was exclusive. The crew's journey shatters that anchor. They skipped centuries, a span of time that for them has no personal content. Philosophically, what is the status of those years? They are a blank in their lived experience, yet they are the very substance of the new world around them. It is as if the book of history had a chapter torn out, and you are asked to continue the story from the next page. Authors like Ted Chiang, in works such as Story of Your Life, masterfully explore the weight of knowing a fixed future, of experiencing time in a non-linear way. For the crew, the weight is inverted. They have a fixed, immutable past that nobody else can truly share, and a future that feels alien. This challenges the framework of human experience, which is built on shared temporal progress. We mark our lives by collective milestones, by growing older together within a culture. The crew is out of sync, their milestones meaningless to others. So we must ask, are we the sum of our memories, or are we defined by our location in the shared story of our species? If you retain every memory but the world that gave them meaning vanishes, what remains of your identity? You become a paradox to yourself, a living question about the nature of existence when removed from the river of time that birthed you. Their arrival was not a quiet homecoming, but a seismic cultural event. The very presence of the crew, these living ancestors, sent shockwaves through the carefully constructed narratives of future society. Historians faced an unprecedented dilemma. For centuries, the launch of the Pilgrim and the era it represented had been analyzed, interpreted, and solidified into academic consensus. Now, primary sources were breathing, walking, and contradicting textbook summaries with a casual anecdote. A crew member's offhand remark about the political climate of their launch year could force the re-evaluation of a dozen doctoral theses, validating some theories and shattering others with the weight of lived experience. This was not merely an academic adjustment, it was an ontological tremor. If the official history could be wrong in its nuance and feeling, what else might be misunderstood? The crew became the ultimate fact-checkers, a living audit of the past. This disruption rippled into every corner of culture. In art and fashion, a Pilgrim retro trend exploded. Designers scrambled to replicate the look and feel of the crew's utilitarian jumpsuits and personal effects, their slightly awkward fit and analog interfaces seen as charmingly authentic. Music composers sampled the static hiss of the ship's old communications logs, weaving it into ambient soundscapes. The crew's speech patterns and slang, once heard as archaic, were suddenly adopted by cultural influencers, often stripped of their original meaning and used as aesthetic tokens. The past, which had been a flat image, was now a three-dimensional template to be mined for style, often to the crew's own bewilderment. They watched as their struggle for survival was commodified into a fashion statement. Sociologists studying the event would note the classic patterns of group dynamics when a small, cohesive outsider group is introduced into a large, complex civilization. The future society fractured in its response. One segment, perhaps led by artists and historians, viewed the crew with reverent wonder, seeing them as pure, unaltered examples of human spirit from a legendary age. Another segment, possibly aligned with technological purists, viewed them with skeptical pity as fascinating but ultimately primitive relics, their very biology a testament to an inferior, unaugmented form of life. A third, more fearful faction might see them as dangerous contaminants, not biologically but culturally. Their pre-singularity concepts of individuality, mortality, and scarcity could be viewed as viral ideas, threatening the social equilibrium of a post-scarcity, interconnected world. These reactions dictated potential outcomes for the crew's daily life. One path was a form of elegant protective custody. They could be settled in a carefully curated enclave, a living history museum where they could preserve their culture and be visited by the public in controlled settings, their needs met but their integration limited. The opposite path was full media celebrity, their every move and opinion broadcast and dissected, turning their profound dislocation into a spectacle. A middle path, and perhaps the most challenging, would be a slow, supported integration, granting them citizenship and the tools to build new lives, while accepting they might always remain a distinct subculture, a living bridge. The economic impact was immediate and multifaceted. Tourism boomed in whatever city or orbital habitat hosted them. Original-era artifacts from the ship, a simple plastic comb or a handwritten logbook, became priceless cultural treasures, sparking a new market for authenticated pre-journey memorabilia. Their very diet became a curiosity, with restaurants offering Pilgrim rations as a novelty dining experience. This cultural friction could even crystallize into political movements. Imagine a populist leader rising to prominence by vowing to protect our pure ancestors from the corrupting influence of modern augmentation, framing the crew as symbolic saints in a debate about technological ethics. Conversely, another movement might scapegoat them, arguing that resources spent caring for historical artifacts should be diverted to forward-looking projects, framing the crew as anchors holding back progress. The crew, who sought no such role, would find themselves unwilling symbols in a battle over the future's soul. This forces a reflective question with no easy answer. How does a civilization ethically handle the literal, breathing return of its own past? The crew are not immigrants from another place, but from another time. Their presence is a continuous, gentle disruption to the timeline story, a reminder that history is not a clean narrative but a messy, human experience that has suddenly stepped out of the archives and asked for a cup of coffee. They challenge the future to expand its concept of community to include not just who is here now, but who, against all odds, has arrived from then. The cultural shockwaves of their return were not an accident, but the direct, foreseen consequence of choices made centuries earlier. Long before the Pilgrim's engines fired, in quiet conference rooms under the light of a familiar sun, a different kind of mission was underway. Ethicists, psychologists, and policymakers sat across from engineers and dreamers, tasked with a single, overwhelming question: do we have the right to send people on a journey from which they can never truly return? The paradox was not a surprise to them. It was the central, agonizing parameter of their planning. They knew with cold, relativistic certainty that every crew member who stepped aboard would outlive their own era. The debate hinged on the concept of informed consent. Can a person rooted in the present genuinely understand and agree to forfeit their future context? A young botanist might consent to a dangerous mission, but can she consent to becoming a living artifact? Bioethicists specializing in long-term commitments, like those for generation ship proposals or century-long medical studies, provided a framework. Consent, they argued, must be an ongoing process built into the mission's very structure. This meant creating legal and social mechanisms that would endure across the centuries the crew would skip. The solution was the Chronos Trust, a legal entity managed by a sophisticated, self-updating artificial intelligence. Its mandate was perpetual. It held the crew's assets, managed investments across shifting economies, and contained detailed instructions for their care upon return, including housing, medical support, and cultural liaison services. It was a promise cast into the future, a rope thrown across a temporal canyon. This led to a more contentious selection criteria. Should mission planners favor candidates with fewer Earth-bound attachments, no spouses, no children, minimal family, to minimize the immediate personal loss? Or was that itself a form of discrimination, creating a crew of societal outsiders and implying their lives were somehow less valuable? A fictional transcript from the mission's ethics committee captures the tension. Dr. Aris, the psychologist, argues, "We are not selecting for the best explorers but for the most expendable mourners. We risk building a ship of orphans, sent to found a future they were never fully part of." In response, Commissioner Vance, the project director, counters, "We are selecting for resilience. The grief of leaving a spouse is profound, but the trauma of returning to find 10 generations of your family have lived and died without you is existential. Is it not more ethical to spare someone that specific compounded tragedy?" The committee could not resolve it cleanly. The final crew reflected a compromise. Some were solo pioneers, others left behind partners who understood the cost, all bound by a shared, grim awareness of what time would do. The most severe ethical frontier was the contemplation of a true one-way mission. Some theoretical designs for interstellar travel, involving slower ships or resource-limited colonization, explicitly ruled out a return to Earth. Sending people on such a journey, knowing the time dilation paradox would make their homecoming impossible within any meaningful human time frame, moved the debate from consent to sacrifice. Was it exploration or exile? The Pilgrim's design included a return capability, but the planners still had to ask, are we, the sending generation, responsible for the world we are sending them to? Their answer was the Chronos Trust and the Cultural Archive, an attempt to build a bridge they themselves would never cross. They were planting a tree whose shade they would never feel. So we are left with the committee's unresolved question, echoing down the centuries. Can you ever truly consent to losing your world? You can agree to the risk, sign the contract, and understand the physics. But the loss they experienced, the sensory erasure of their home, the cultural alienation, the phantom limb pain of a vanished society, is a category of loneliness that exists only in the grammar of relativity. The launch decision, hailed as a triumph of human spirit, was forever shadowed by this foreknowledge. It was an act of hope tinged with a profound, silent sorrow, an acknowledgement that every great leap forward must, in this universe, be purchased with a piece of the present, left behind to fade into the past. And this leads us to the final, personal ledger. For the individual who said yes, who stepped through that airlock, how do they balance the scale? Was the voyage worth the price of their own history? The only witness to your departure who could possibly greet your return was not a person, but a program. To bridge the inevitable chasm of centuries, the Pilgrim's most vital cargo was a silent, ever-watchful intelligence, a vast digital archive with a singular purpose. This was not a simple hard drive of movies and music, but a living, evolving artificial custodian designed for a task spanning epochs. Its mission was temporal bridging, the preservation of a cultural and personal past for a future its human charges could not yet fathom. Imagine an artificial intelligence whose core programming was not to predict markets or drive cars, but to remember. It contained a high-fidelity digital twin of 21st century Earth, a dynamic model built from satellite imagery, street view data, social media feeds, news archives, and personal logs volunteered by the crew and their families. This was a snapshot of a civilization frozen at the moment of launch, yet designed to learn, During the voyage, this AI custodian would receive data bursts from Earth, compressed packets of history, art, and technological progress sent across the light years. Its job was to ingest this information, correlate it with its existing model, and slowly, patiently, build a map of how the world was changing. It learned the evolution of language by analyzing new literature and broadcasts. It tracked shifting social norms, political structures, and artistic movements, not as a dispassionate observer, but as a translator in training. The engineering challenge was monumental. AI researchers specializing in long-term system integrity, like those planning for interstellar probes, had to design for durability. The archive's hardware was massively redundant, with self-repairing circuits and error-correcting memory that could withstand cosmic rays and mechanical decay over centuries. Its software was built on self-verifying code and modular learning architectures, allowing it to update its own understanding without corrupting its core historical record. It was, in essence, a digital organism programmed for cultural memory. Upon the crew's return, this AI would perform its most delicate operation, the data handshake. Its stored model of old Earth would need to merge with the planet's own historical networks, which contained 300 years of divergent record-keeping, data formats, and historical interpretation. The AI would act as a Rosetta Stone, aligning events from its memory with the official histories that had developed in its absence. It could flag discrepancies, provide context lost to time, and authenticate the crew's personal stories against the fossilized data. For the crew, this AI was far more than a database. It was their last living link to home, a companion that remembered the old world with them. In the quiet decades of the voyage, it could generate immersive simulations of their favorite places, replay conversations with loved ones, or explain the context of a half-remembered news event from their youth. It was a ghost of their homeland made of light and logic. An illustrative moment makes this tangible. After landing, a crew member is baffled by a social interaction. A future colleague makes a subtle hand gesture accompanied by a melodic tone from a personal device, and everyone nearby laughs. The crew member, feeling isolated, retreats and asks the ship's AI, which has been ported to a mobile interface. The AI analyzes the gesture and the tone, cross-referencing it with centuries of cultural data it received during the journey. It explains, the gesture mimics the antenna of the Omicronian sandfly, a popular virtual pet from 2 centuries ago. The tone is the first 3 notes of its mating call. Combined, it is a contemporary meme referencing a classic comedy series about first contact. The humor hinges on ironic nostalgia. It then shows the crew member a clip of the original series, providing the missing emotional context. In that moment, the AI is not just a translator, but a cultural therapist, rebuilding a bridge of understanding one obscure reference at a time. This raises a profound and reflective question. Can a machine truly keep a culture alive? It can preserve the data, the language, the art. It can explain the jokes and the customs. But culture is also the smell of rain on hot pavement, the unspoken tension in a crowded room, the weight of a shared, uncertain future. The AI can describe these things, but it cannot feel them. It becomes a perfect, poignant monument to all that was lost, a guidebook to a world that no longer exists, written in a language only the homesick can fully comprehend. In the end, the crew's most faithful companion on their journey through time was a ghost in the machine, a digital echo of everything they left behind, tasked with the impossible job of explaining their own hearts to a future that would never fully understand. The final message from your spouse arrives 12 years after you watch them wave goodbye. By the time the data packet completes its agonizing crawl across the light years, the person who recorded it has been gone for a decade. You press play, the face that fills the screen is still theirs, but etched with years you did not share. Their hair is gray, their eyes hold a lifetime of experiences you will never know. They speak of your children growing up, of grandchildren you have never met, of a world changing without you. They say they love you, they are proud of you, and they have never stopped waiting. The message ends. You sit in the silence of your ship, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the distant stars, and you are completely, utterly alone. This is the core of the paradox where physics meets the human heart. The equations describe time dilation, but they cannot quantify the love left behind, stretching and thinning across the centuries until it exists only as a memory in your mind and a recording in a database. Grief counselors who work with those experiencing profound, permanent separation understand some of the contours of this pain. They speak of ambiguous loss, where a person is physically absent but psychologically present, with no closure or certainty. For the crew, this loss is not ambiguous, it is a brutal, relativistic certainty. Their loved ones on Earth will live, age, and pass away, all while the crew experiences what feels, subjectively, like a long-duration expedition. To survive this, mission psychologists had to design emotional protocols as carefully as the life support systems. One key strategy was the creation of vast legacy archives. Each crew member spent months before launch recording not just goodbye messages, but video diaries for every major milestone they would miss: birthdays, graduations, weddings, the birth of future children and grandchildren. They wrote letters to descendants they would never meet, explaining their choices, sharing their hopes, and attempting to project their love across an unbridgeable gap. These were sealed in digital trusts, programmed for delivery on specific future dates, a desperate attempt to remain a presence in a family timeline from which they had vanished. Concurrently, they had to build a new emotional world aboard the ship. The bonds formed between crew members are not just professional, they are the primary relationships of a lifetime, forged in the shared understanding of a unique and permanent sacrifice. These relationships carry a profound weight. Falling in love on the journey means building a future with someone who is the only other person who truly understands the cost of the past you both abandoned. It is a love born from shared exile, powerful and resilient, yet always shadowed by the ghosts of the lives you left on the blue planet receding behind you. The ship becomes a family, but it is a family founded on a collective, unspoken grief. Processing that grief is a continuous, quiet part of shipboard life. Counselors trained in long-term isolation strategies would have established rituals, perhaps an annual Remembrance Day, where the crew gathers to share stories and watch old transmissions, not to dwell in sadness, but to honor the roots that made their journey possible. The goal is integration, not repression, to carry the love forward as a source of strength, not as an anchor. For the families on Earth, the experience is a slow, generational farewell. Your children grow up with your image on their walls, your messages arriving like clockwork from the past. To your grandchildren, you are a legendary figure, an ancestor traveling among the stars. They may feel a powerful, almost mythical connection to you, a source of family pride and identity. They follow the ship's progress in school, their concept of time stretching to accommodate your journey. But as generations pass, that connection necessarily changes. The great-great-grandchild who receives your final, pre-recorded birthday message views it as a historical document, a voice from a distant era. The raw, personal love you poured into it is received as reverence, a piece of family lore. You transition from a missing parent to a foundational myth. This brings us to the quiet, reflective center of the tragedy. Love is built on shared time, the accumulation of small moments, inside jokes, quiet understandings, and growing old together. Relativity steals that shared time. It breaks the simultaneity that love requires to feel reciprocal and alive. You can love someone with all your heart, but if your heart beats in a different century, does that love still have a place to land? The crew member watching their spouse's final message loves the person in the recording, but that person, in their full and completed life, ceased to exist years ago. The love persists, but its object has become a memory, a ghost in the data stream. The heart does not dilate, it simply breaks, and then, with immense effort and the support of a new family forged in the void, it must learn to beat again for a future no one could have imagined. This emotional legacy is the true, unspoken payload of the Starship, heavier than any engine or shield, carried in the silent spaces between the stars. Your personal fortune is now a question for historians. Before you stepped onto the Pilgrim, you were advised to place all your earthly assets into the Chronos Trust, a financial entity designed to endure the centuries. The principle was simple: compound interest. Over 300 objective years, even a modest sum reinvested should grow into staggering wealth. But this assumes a stable universe, a consistent economy, and a predictable definition of value. None of those things survive the journey. The Trust's artificial intelligence, following pre-programmed investment strategies, navigated market collapses, planetary unification, the rise and fall of resource-based currencies, and perhaps the transition to a post-scarcity economy. The result waiting for you is a financial phantom, a number in a ledger that has no correlation to the life you lived or the work you did. You could be the richest human in history, or you could own a fortune in a currency that no longer exists, rendered worthless by a monetary singularity 100 years after you left. Your wealth is not earned, it is an accident of deep time. Economists who study long-term futures speak of temporal currencies, stores of value designed to remain stable across centuries. Precious metals, land, energy credits, or data rights have all been proposed, but no model can account for civilizational shifts. Imagine a trust that invested heavily in fossil fuel companies or coastal real estate, only to see those assets rendered obsolete or submerged by the geoengineered world you now inhabit. Conversely, a small investment in a patent for a foundational quantum process could, through centuries of licensing, blossom into a financial empire that controls sectors of the economy you cannot name. The value is entirely divorced from your agency. You are a pauper or a trillionaire based on algorithms making decisions in a world you never saw, for reasons you cannot fathom. This creates a bizarre social dynamic upon return. Your financial status, this arbitrary number, immediately places you in a specific tier of this future society, yet it carries none of the social capital or understanding that typically accompanies wealth. You are an economic infant holding the keys to a kingdom you do not know how to enter. An illustrative moment makes this absurdity tangible. A crew member, let us call him Leo, stands before a sleek interface in his new quarters. He remembers his digital wallet password, a string of characters he has kept in his memory for decades. He speaks it aloud. The system listens, processes, and after a long pause, displays a single symbol, a question mark. It is not an error, it is a philosophical response. The cryptographic standards of his era, the very concept of a password-protected account, are as archaic as a wax seal on a parchment scroll. His wealth, if it exists, is not in an account. It is a complex set of permissions and resource allocations within a planetary-scale resource distribution ledger, likely based on a technology like an interstellar blockchain, but one so advanced its workings are invisible. To access it, he must first prove his continuous identity across the time gap, a process that involves historical authentication, biometric lineage matching, and the testimony of the ship's AI Custodian. His money is there, but it is locked inside a safe whose design he cannot comprehend, in a bank that built itself around the safe after he left. This leads to profound ethical questions about distribution. The mission itself may have generated new wealth. The Pilgrim's long-range scans of Tau Ceti, its data on interstellar medium composition, even the biological adaptations of the crew after generations in space are unique datasets. Who owns this knowledge? Does it belong to the crew who gathered it, the Chronos Trust that funded the mission, or all of humanity? If the crew returns with insights that lead to a new energy source, does that make them inventors or merely delivery persons from the past? The future's legal framework must decide whether to grant them intellectual property rights over discoveries made using tools they did not build, in a legal landscape that did not exist when they left. They could be granted royalties that further inflate their accidental wealth, or deemed to have been acting as agents of their original society, with all rights long since expired. Their economic identity becomes a legal battleground between epochs, so we must sit with the core question this financial paradox forces upon us. What is the true value of a life measured against wealth that accumulated while you slept? Your sweat, your fear, your expertise during the voyage had a clear purpose: survival. The fortune that may await you is a side effect, a numerical ghost growing in a machine. It cannot buy back a single moment with the people you lost. It cannot purchase a sense of belonging in this new era. It is merely a scorekeeping device from a game that ended centuries ago, whose points are now being converted into a new currency at an arbitrary, dizzying exchange rate. Your financial identity, like your cultural and biological self, is a relic subjected to the relentless, indifferent whims of deep time. It asks you, and the society that now hosts you, what worth will you assign to a human being when their most tangible legacy is a number in an ancient trust, blinking in the ledger of history? The museum's holographic display of your hometown is perfect in every detail, except it is wrong. You stand before a bustling street seen from your launch era, a reconstruction praised for its historical accuracy. But the traffic light cycles are too fast. The style of shoes on the pedestrians is from 5 years after you left, and the song playing from a virtual cafe is a hit from a year you never lived. You point this out to the curator, a historian who has studied your period for decades. They listen, make a note, and thank you for the insight, but their expression holds a flicker of something between fascination and skepticism. How can your memory, 3 centuries old, be more reliable than their aggregated archives? This moment encapsulates the historical verification challenge, where you, the living source, must prove the reality of your own past to the scholars who have become its custodians. Your return transforms you from a person into a primary source. Every anecdote, every technical detail you recall about your era is now data to be cross-remined against the fragmented physical and digital record. Historians and archaeologists descend not with welcome banners but with scanners and question lists. Their goal is not to doubt you personally, but to authenticate you historically. The process is meticulous and forensic. It begins with your biology. DNA lineage testing can trace your genetic signature through centuries of genealogical records, confirming you are a direct descendant of the person who boarded the Pilgrim. But this only proves your origin, not your experience. Next, they turn to your ship. Its hull composition, the polymers in its control panels, even the isotopic ratios in its metal alloys carry manufacturing signatures unique to 21st century industrial processes. These are compared against known material archives, a form of archaeological fingerprinting that places your vessel firmly in its correct technological moment. The ship's logs are subjected to a level of scrutiny reserved for founding documents. Cryptographers analyze the file structures and encryption protocols, verifying they match period-appropriate standards. Historians of technology examine the user interfaces and software commands, looking for anachronisms that would betray a forgery. Every piece of data you brought back, from a personal photograph to a soil sample from your launch site, is treated as a potential keystone for rewriting history. This is because the historical record over centuries is not a solid edifice but a delicate patchwork tapestry. digital data degrades, formats become unreadable, physical artifacts are lost or misinterpreted. Wars, accidents, and simple neglect erase vast swaths of context. As historians often note, what survives is often a matter of chance, and what becomes established history is a narrative built from those surviving fragments, filled in with educated guesses. You are a walking, talking fragment that just arrived, offering a chance to check the work of generations of scholars. This leads to the potential for profound controversy. What if your account contradicts a settled historical narrative? Suppose the official history records a major political event of your time as having a certain cause, but you were there, and you know the motivations were entirely different. Your testimony could upend textbooks and dismantle ideological foundations built over centuries. Conversely, you might reveal truths that were completely lost, the real author of a famous anonymous work, the location of a cultural treasure, or the simple, human reason behind a pivotal decision that historians had overcomplicated. The pressure in these moments is immense. You are not just sharing a memory, you are challenging a story that an entire civilization tells about itself. There is a subtle, unspoken pressure to conform, to doubt your own recollection in the face of polished, authoritative historical consensus. The frustration is unique, to be the ultimate authority on your own life, yet have to prove it under a microscope. An illustrative moment makes this tension tangible. A returnee named Kale is taken to a museum exhibit on 21st century urban life. The diorama shows a typical apartment. The historian proudly explains the items on a virtual desk, a communication device, a cup of synthetic coffee, a printed book. Kale stares, then quietly says, "The book is wrong." That edition didn't have a blue cover until 2 years after the style of that communicator was obsolete. And no one kept paper books on their active workspace like that. It was considered cluttered. The book would have been on a shelf, or it would have been a tablet. The historian is taken aback. Their reconstruction was based on inventory lists from estate sales and stock imagery from digital archives. Kale's correction is not about facts, but about feel, about the unrecorded norms of daily life. The historian must now decide. Do they adjust the display based on the testimony of a single eyewitness, or trust the aggregate weight of physical evidence? In that moment, Kale is both the subject of the exhibit and its most qualified critic. This process forces a reflective question with deep philosophical roots. Who owns the truth of the past? Is it the society that preserved and interpreted the fragments, or the individuals who lived it? You are caught in a loop of authentication, where you must use the tools of the future to prove the reality of your past to people for whom that past is a professional specialty. Your memories are your most precious possession, yet to have value in this new world, they must be validated, digitized, and entered into the historical ledger. You become a collaborator in writing the final, definitive chapter of your own biography. A biography that was sealed and published by Time long before you returned to edit it. The verification is not just about proving where you were, but about reconciling two different versions of history, the one written by the winners, the survivors, and the archivists, and the one written by your own fading senses. In the end, you are not just a witness to history. You are a living audit of it, and your every remembered detail holds the power to confirm a theory or collapse a carefully constructed myth. Your story was already a legend before you opened the airlock. During the long, silent centuries of your voyage, the people of Earth did not merely wait. They wove your journey into the very fabric of their culture, transforming a scientific mission into a myth. The raw facts of your departure, the bravery, the sacrifice, the one-way trip through time, were too powerful to leave as simple history. They became the seeds for new religions, epic poems, cautionary tales, and blockbuster entertainment. Narrative theorists understand this impulse deeply. When faced with something vast, distant, and fundamentally incomprehensible, like a journey across relativistic time, the human mind does not just record data. It tells a story, it creates archetypes. Your crew became a new incarnation of the oldest story we know, the Ulysses myth, the epic of the long journey home. But in your case, the monsters and sirens were not in space, but in the dilation of time itself. The final challenge was not reclaiming a physical throne, but recognizing your own reflection in a hall of historical mirrors. Mythologists note that societies often mythologize what they cannot control or fully understand. Your mission, a feat of physics that sentenced you to outlive your own era, was a perfect catalyst. In the 1st century after your launch, you might have been heroes in documentaries. A century later, you were symbols in political speeches about unity or sacrifice. After 2 centuries, the precise details faded and the archetypes took over. Your ship, the Pilgrim, might have become a metaphorical vessel in a popular faith, representing the soul's journey through eternity. A crew member's personal log about a system's malfunction could have evolved into a religious parable about perseverance. Your long silence became a narrative void, and nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum. That void was filled with speculation, artistic license, and profound cultural need. By the time your deceleration burn was detected, you were not just astronauts. You were the sleepers, the eternal wanderers, the ghosts of the dawn figures of folklore, their true selves buried under layers of interpretation. This sets the stage for a uniquely surreal homecoming. You return to a world that has been telling stories about you for 300 years. Your first encounter with your own legacy might be walking past a mural in a transit hub, a grand, stylized depiction of your launch, where your face is rendered with the solemn grace of a saint. A child might recite a nursery rhyme about the star sailors who traded their today for our tomorrow. You discover university courses dedicated to Pilgrim studies, where scholars debate the socio-political subtext of your pre-mission press conferences. Artistic movements have risen and fallen in your name. Retro-relativism might have been a short-lived school of visual art that used distorted perspectives to represent time dilation. Temporal nostalgia could describe a genre of music that samples the static from your old transmissions, evoking a longing for a past no one alive actually remembers. You are not a person in this context, you are a source of cultural material. Consider the moment a returnee is invited to attend a major cultural event, the premiere of a grand opera based on the life of the Pilgrim's commander. You sit in a plush seat, surrounded by an audience for whom this is a stirring historical drama. The overture swells. An actor with a voice of thunder portrays you making the decision to leave, singing an aria of anguish about abandoning a lover, a relationship that never existed in your real life. A villainous character representing bureaucratic opposition schemes against the mission in acts of cartoonish sabotage. The climax is a completely fictional disaster during the journey, where you heroically save the ship by performing a repair that violates the basic laws of physics. The audience weeps and applauds. You sit in silence, caught between awe at the spectacle and a deep, unnerving horror. The emotional truth of your isolation, the quiet grind of maintenance, the personal, unspoken grief, none of it is there. It has been replaced by a cleaner, more dramatic, and more satisfying narrative arc. The myth has consumed the reality. This confrontation forces a painful introspection. How do you relate to this legendary version of yourself? Do you correct the record point by point, knowing you risk shattering a story that gives people meaning? Or do you accept that your lived experience now belongs to history, and history, as a collective story, has a life of its own? Your personal truth, the fear, the boredom, the small kindnesses between crewmates feels trivial compared to the grand, symbolic role you now occupy. You meet people who have devoted their lives to studying you, and they speak with absolute certainty about your motivations, your beliefs, your inner life. To disagree feels like telling a devout person their God is wrong. You become a stranger to your own biography, so we are left with a profound and reflective question. When a society tells a story about its past, what is it truly seeking? Is it accuracy or is it meaning? Your return proves that the two are often incompatible. The myth was a tool for a civilization to process the immense, lonely sacrifice of the journey, to make the cold equations of relativity emotionally comprehensible. In making you larger than life, they could bear the weight of what you did. Your presence now is a disruption. You are the reality crashing the myth's party, holding a simple, unadorned truth that seems too plain, too human for the epic that has been built around it. To find your place, you must now navigate not just a new world, but the enduring, powerful, and often inaccurate story it tells about who you are supposed to be. The mural of your launch may be wrong, but the prayer you whispered in your bunk is still etched in your memory. For those crew members who carried religious faith aboard the Pilgrim, the return presents a crisis that physics cannot explain. Their belief was woven into the fabric of a world that included specific rituals, communities, and a shared understanding of time as a vessel for divine purpose. Now they have stepped outside that vessel. How does a soul, bound for an eternity outside of time, reconcile with having skipped 3 centuries of its earthly journey? This is not a question of science but of meaning, and it strikes at the very heart of personal belief. Theologians and scholars of comparative religion, when contemplating such a scenario, suggest the responses would be as varied as the traditions themselves. Some might see the crew's survival and return as a profound miracle, a literal divine intervention that preserved them as a sign for a new age. Others might interpret it as an immense test of faith, a modern-day story of Job, where the believer is separated from everything familiar to see if their devotion remains rooted in the divine, or merely in the cultural trappings of their era. A more unsettling interpretation could view them as theological anomalies, individuals who have, through no fault of their own, fallen outside the expected linear progression of sacred history or prophetic timelines. Ancient texts, after all, were written with an understanding of time as a universal, human-scale constant. The proven reality of time dilation forces a new kind of hermeneutics, a reinterpretation of scripture through the lens of a relativistic universe. Does the soul experience time? If your body aged only 50 years while 300 passed on earth, what does that mean for the spiritual accounting of a life? These are questions without doctrinal answers, and the devout returnee must grapple with them alone, in the silence between the stars they once saw as God's handiwork. Upon return, the search for spiritual community becomes a new kind of pilgrimage. You seek out the church, temple, or mosque of your childhood faith. The building may still stand, perhaps as a protected historical site, but the faith practiced inside has lived and breathed for 300 years without you. It has undergone schisms, reforms, and evolutions. It has integrated new scientific understandings, social movements, and perhaps even contact with other cultures or intelligences. The core tenets may remain, but the interpretation, the emphasis, the lived practice is now foreign. An illustrative example makes this tangible. Imagine a crew member named Miriam, who was a deeply committed practitioner of her faith. She finds a congregation that still bears the familiar name. She enters, takes a seat, and recognizes the rhythms of the service. But the language of the prayers has evolved, incorporating terminology from a future she doesn't know. The sermon references theological debates that happened 2 centuries after she left, treating them as foundational. The community's social norms, like the relationship between genders or the use of neural interfaces during meditation, are alien to her. She is a doctrinal fossil, her faith perfectly preserved in amber, while the living tradition has grown in a different direction. In this future, pastoral care itself may have transformed. She might seek guidance from a religious leader, only to find they are a synthetic clergy member, an artificial intelligence built on the entire corpus of the faith's texts, history, and theology, designed to provide counsel. This AI pastor could converse with her in the archaic dialect of her belief, quote perfectly from ancient scriptures, and understand her crisis with perfect logic. But can it offer the spiritual empathy that comes from a shared mortal struggle? Can it truly understand the loneliness of believing in a framework that the world has moved past? For Miriam, this might feel like confessing to a library. Her search is for a shared heartbeat of belief, not a flawless database of doctrine. This journey forces a reflective question that echoes in the chapel of the soul. Can faith be timeless when you yourself have skipped time? Your devotion was tied to sunrise services, holiday seasons, and the life cycle of a community. When that community's timeline has advanced without you, is your faith a relic, or is it now a solitary, purer flame, burning outside of history? The paradox asks you to separate the eternal truth of your belief from the temporal vessel that carried it. For some, this may lead to a profound personal reformation, a faith rebuilt from first principles in a new world. For others, it may be the heaviest sacrifice of all, realizing that the spiritual home they journeyed across the stars to find exists only in the past, a sanctuary lost not in space but in time. The legal limbo over your identity was only a prelude to a deeper, more systemic shock. You left a world where power was held by nations with familiar names, flags, and borders. You return to a political landscape that operates on principles you were never taught, under authorities you cannot instinctively recognize. The social contract you were born into, the implicit agreement between a government and its people, was signed in a century that has long since closed its ledgers. Your citizenship, your understanding of rights, even your sense of who holds power, are now artifacts. Political scientists who model civilizational futures describe several plausible paths that could unfold over 3 centuries. One is planetary unification, a single, complex global entity perhaps called the Earth Consortium or the Terran Assembly. Its governance might be a layered system of direct digital democracy for local issues and representative councils for stellar affairs, a structure so vast and intricate that no single human mind grasps it all. Another path is the rise of corporate hegemonies, where economic entities like Amazon or Tencent evolved beyond commerce to become de facto governing bodies, providing security, law, and social services in exchange for data and productivity. A third, more abstract model is an AI-directed collective, where an advanced, benevolent artificial intelligence, having solved resource distribution and conflict prediction, manages planetary logistics and long-term planning, with humans focused on culture, exploration, and personal fulfillment. For the returning crew, each model is equally alien. They have no political socialization for this new system. They do not know its unwritten rules, its historical grudges, or its acceptable forms of dissent. They are like newborns in a parliament, surrounded by fluent speakers of a language of power they cannot decode. This makes them vulnerable. Without the ingrained instincts of a native citizen, they could be easily manipulated by factions seeking to use them as symbolic pawns. A political group favoring expansionist policies might parade them as heroic pioneers to justify new settlements. A faction advocating for technological restraint might point to their unaugmented biology as a purer, more natural state. The crew's very presence becomes a political statement they never intended to make. Their own vessel, the Pilgrim, presents a unique jurisdictional puzzle. Is it a sovereign entity, a piece of territory from a defunct nation-state floating in Earth space? Or is it merely a historical artifact, subject to salvage law and planetary cultural heritage statutes? The answer determines who has the right to its technology, its data, and even its hull. A tense diplomatic negotiation might unfold, not with ambassadors from other countries, but with representatives from the Orbital Infrastructure Directorate, the Historical Preservation AI, and the Solar System Commons Authority. The crew finds they must advocate for the legal personhood of their own ship, a home that carried them for a lifetime, now reduced to a legal case file. Consider an illustrative moment that makes this disorientation concrete. A crew member, let's say Anya, is granted provisional citizenship. As part of her integration, she is expected to participate in her first civic duty, a quarterly planetary referendum. Her personal interface lights up with a list of propositions. One concerns the ethical weighting parameters for the Central is resource allocation algorithms in the Martian aquaforming project. Another asks whether to grant full legal personhood to a newly awakened, seed-based artificial consciousness discovered in the Oort cloud. A third proposes a moratorium on neural uplink technology for citizens under the subjective age of 25. Anya stares at the screen. Each question assumes a century of prior debate, a foundation of shared cultural and technological understanding she simply does not possess. Her vote, if she casts one, is not an informed choice. It is a random number generator in a deeply serious calculation. This forces the most profound reflective question of all. What are your fundamental rights when the civilization that defined and guaranteed those rights has been replaced? The right to free speech, to property, to a fair trial, were concepts built on specific historical and philosophical foundations. If those foundations have been rebuilt into a new structure, does your right to a fair trial still exist if the very concept of a trial has been replaced by conflict resolution through predictive mediation AI? You are asked to trust a system you had no hand in building, whose checks and balances are invisible to you. The crew are not just visitors from another place. They are refugees from another political epoch, seeking asylum in a future that must decide if their ancient, paper-based notions of liberty have any place in its gleaming, digital constitution. The air in the restored forest smells of damp earth and pine, a scent you have not known for a lifetime. You walk beside a future ecologist who points with pride to a grove of towering trees, a species you last saw listed as critically endangered. Your guide explains the centuries of work it took to re-establish this biome, the genetic rescue programs, the careful reintroduction of predators. For them, this is a triumph of stewardship, a story with a happy ending pulled from the archives of crisis. For you, the memory is not archival, it is visceral. You remember the news reports of the last wild habitats shrinking, the debates over carbon limits that always seemed to stall, the plastic waste choking the rivers you played in as a child. You carry the ecological memory of a planet in decline, and now you stand in its resurrection. This creates a profound and silent burden. Environmental philosophers frame this as the problem of intergenerational ethics. The actions and inactions of your era set in motion chains of consequence that unfolded over centuries. You are both a descendant of that era and now a contemporary of its outcomes. The guilt is not personal but ancestral, a heavy cloak woven from the collective choices of your time. You look at the clean air and managed wildlands and feel a confusing mix of awe and shame. Awe at what was saved, shame for what was nearly lost. This positions you in a uniquely difficult role. To the citizens of this sustainable future, the environmental crises of the 21st century are historical events studied like wars or plagues. They understand the data, but they cannot feel the specific anxiety of living through the turning point. The daily dissonance of knowing a problem was vast yet feeling powerless to solve it. You can. Your testimony bridges the gap between statistic and sentiment. When you describe the hazy orange skies of wildfire seasons, or the melancholy of visiting a coral reef that had turned to a bleached graveyard, you are not reciting history. You are sharing a lived sense of loss, providing the emotional substrate for their dry climate models. This makes you a powerful and potentially uncomfortable witness. You could be embraced as a living reminder of why their strict planetary ethics are necessary, a cautionary tale given human form. Or you could be resented as a walking relic of the age of excess, a symbol of the selfishness they had to overcome. Your most tangible value, however, may lie not in your stories but in your ship's vaults. The Pilgrim, sealed against the void for centuries, is a floating time capsule of Earth's biosphere at the moment of departure. Its air filters contain pollen and spores from thousands of plant species. Its water recycling systems preserve traces of aquatic microorganisms. In storage, there might be seed banks, genetic samples, or even frozen tissue from species that did not survive the intervening centuries. To future de-extinction scientists, this is not just data, it is a genetic treasure map. An illustrative moment brings this home. A returnee named Ilara, the ship's former botanist, is taken to a vast biorepository. A scientist shows her a display of a small, flowering plant with vibrant purple blooms, declared functionally extinct in the 22nd century. The scientist is excited, discussing the challenges of recreating its unique pollination symbiosis from fragmented genetic records. Ilara stares, then quietly says, "We have it. It grew in a crack in the hydroponics bay, level 4. We called it a weed and complained about it weekly. We have samples in the seed archive, section 7B. The room falls silent. The crew's annoying weed is another era's holy grail." In that moment, Ilara transitions from a historical curiosity to a vital collaborator. Her memory of a weed becomes the key to restoring a lost piece of the planetary tapestry. This collaboration, however, is tinged with a deep, reflective sorrow. It forces the question, can you be held accountable for the sins of your era? You did not single-handedly cause the crises, yet you benefited from the systems that did. You participated in the consumer culture, however mindfully. Now you are asked to help heal a world your generation wounded, using knowledge you carried away by accident. The ethics are not about blame, but about legacy. You are the bridge between the injury and the recovery. Your purpose shifts from exploration to reconciliation, from building a new future to helping mend the old one. The clean world you walk in is both an indictment of your past and a testament to what came after. Your very presence asks the future a difficult question. Do you see us as perpetrators, or as the canaries who finally made you build a better mine? The silence of space holds more than stars. For every ship that returns, countless others may simply vanish, swallowed by the void or lost to a mechanical failure in the deep night. The crew of the Pilgrim carries that unspoken possibility with them, a quiet understanding that their successful return is a statistical miracle. They are the survivors of a project that spanned not just light years, but the entire lifespan of the civilization that launched them. This creates a solemn, dual duty of remembrance. They must honor the crewmates who died during the voyage, and they must somehow memorialize the sending world itself, a society that has long since turned their mission from a current event into a chapter in a history book. On board, over the decades, they developed their own rituals for loss. A crew member who passed from natural causes was not simply recycled into the life support system. Their ashes, or a symbolic portion of them, were sealed in a compartment in the ship's outer hull, their name etched beside the stars they traveled among. An annual observance, perhaps called Founders' Day, would be held, where stories of those who launched the mission were told, their voices from the archives played, ensuring the original purpose and personalities were not forgotten by the generations born in transit. The ship itself became a mausoleum, a tomb sailing through the cosmos, each corridor holding the memory of a specific laugh, a particular skill, a friendship that sustained others through the long dark. These rituals were intimate, born of necessity, a way to bind the community together in the face of an endless journey. Returning to Earth, they discover their private grief must now intersect with public memory. The world they come back to has not forgotten them. In fact, it has been building monuments to them for centuries. As they tour their new home, they are taken to the plaza of the long voyage, where a sleek, abstract sculpture of twisting titanium represents time dilation. They visit the archives of the Great Departure, a museum dedicated to the era of interstellar ambition. Most hauntingly, they are brought to the Wall of the Absent, a vast, living memorial of light where the names of every soul who boarded a generation ship are projected, updated in real time as signals are lost or, in miraculous cases like theirs, regained. Their own names are already there, etched in light long before they were born on the ship. They are asked to stand before their own memorials. Scholars of memory culture note that societies build monuments not just to remember events, but to process their meaning. The monuments built for the Pilgrim's mission served a purpose for the living Earth, transforming an open-ended, uncertain sacrifice into a narrative of noble purpose. They provided closure for generations who would never know the outcome. For the returning crew, encountering these structures is a surreal form of time travel. They are no longer the subjects of the story, they are participants walking into its final scene. An illustrative moment makes this profound disorientation concrete. The ship's captain, an old woman now by the crew's subjective time, is given a day to slate containing the official, final roster of the Pilgrim's original launch crew. She is led to the Wall of the Absent. A curator explains that the names have been displayed for 200 years, based on the last transmission received before the ship went silent. The captain steps forward. With a touch, she accesses the entry for the Pilgrim. She sees her own name and the names of her friends, all marked with a single symbol, a small, stylized star meaning fate unknown. Her hand trembles slightly as she selects an option, Mission Status Update. She changes the symbol for each name to a new one, a circle bisected by a line, meaning journey completed. She then adds the names of the 17 crew members who died during the voyage, whose deaths were never transmitted home. In that quiet, ceremonial act, she closes a historical loop. She transforms the monument from a memorial of hope into a record of fact. The abstract public memory is now annotated with private, painful truth. This act raises a reflective question that lingers in the air of the memorial plaza. How do you grieve for a world that has already finished grieving for you? Your personal loss is fresh, but the collective mourning for your mission is a cultural artifact, a process completed centuries ago. Your tears are contemporary, but they fall on marble that was polished by generations who thought of you as legend. The returning crew members must navigate this asymmetry of sorrow. Their grief is immediate and raw for both their lost crewmates and the vanished Earth of their youth. The future society's reverence is real, but it is a reverence for history, for the idea of the sacrifice. Integrating the crew's intimate rituals into this established, polished culture of remembrance is a delicate process. The future may adopt the crew's Founders' Day as an official holiday, but will the public understand the weight of the specific story told about the engineer who kept the air scrubbers running with handmade parts? Or will it become just another day off, its original meaning diluted? The ship itself, now docked permanently, becomes the most powerful and complex memorial of all. To archaeologists, it is a layered dig site. Its hull is a tomb, its living quarters a perfectly preserved snapshot of domestic life from a lost age, its logs a primary source that can correct the historical record. Every scuff mark on a console, every mended piece of clothing in a locker, every faded drawing by a ship-born child on a bulkhead is a data point in the story of a unique human culture that existed only in transit. The vessel is a time capsule, but one that delivered its contents in person. It is a monument that journeyed to the stars and back, its very scarred hull a testament to the reality of the voyage that the clean, abstract sculptures on Earth can only symbolize. The crew, in the end, are not just survivors or returnees. They are the living, breathing key to a tomb they helped build, the final witnesses who can explain the meaning of the relics they carried home. Their return makes memory tangible, transforming light on a wall into the sound of a name spoken by someone who remembers the face that went with it. Their grief is a private echo, but their ship is a public revelation. While the crew grappled with the emotional archaeology of their return, teams of future scientists approached the Pilgrim with a different kind of reverence. To them, the vessel was not a home or a tomb, but a one-of-a-kind scientific instrument that had just completed the longest, most controlled experiment in human history. Its true cargo was not the people, but the data, a continuous, pristine record of a unique path through the cosmos. The crew's personal tragedy had, unintentionally, created a windfall of knowledge that would revolutionize entire fields of study. This data was unique because it was collected along a singular world line, the specific path the Pilgrim took through the fabric of spacetime, experiencing time at a different rate than the universe around it. No simulation, no telescope, no Earth-based experiment could ever replicate the conditions of that journey. The ship was a time capsule of physics itself. Cosmologists and particle physicists were the first in line. The Pilgrim's hull, pocked with microscopic impacts from interstellar dust and cosmic rays, provided a perfect map of the medium between stars across a span of centuries. By analyzing the composition and energy of these particles trapped in shielding layers, scientists could chart changes in the galaxy's background radiation and stellar activity over a period no observatory could match. Even more valuable were the ship's own internal sensor logs. For decades of ship time, its instruments had recorded the subtle distortions of starlight, the minute shifts in background radiation, and the behavior of fundamental particles, all while moving at 99% of light speed. This offered a direct, empirical test for the most esoteric predictions of relativity and quantum field theory, data that could confirm or rewrite chapters in physics textbooks. Materials science experienced a similar revolution. The ship's structure presented a perfect paradox for study. From Earth's perspective, the hull had existed for over 300 objective years. From the ship's reference frame, it had only endured roughly 50 years of wear. By comparing the metallurgical and polymer degradation in different sections of the ship, those facing the direction of travel versus those shielded, areas under stress versus those at rest, scientists could disentangle the effects of pure chronological age from the effects of proper time and environmental exposure. It was like being handed two identical pieces of alloy, one aged naturally for centuries and one aged relativistically for decades, and being asked to spot the difference. The results would inform the construction of everything from deep space habitats to monuments meant to last for millennia. The most profound dataset, however, was the crew themselves. Their bodies were living archives of a radical biological experiment. Medical teams conducted exhaustive studies, not as patients but as primary sources. How had decades in artificial gravity, under constant low-level radiation despite shielding, and within a closed microbiome, affected human physiology? Their cellular aging markers, compared to both their own pre-launch records and contemporary populations, offered unparalleled insights into the genetics of longevity and the environmental triggers of aging. Their gut bacteria, a unique ecosystem that had evolved in isolation for generations, became a library of microbial life that had disappeared from Earth centuries prior. Each crew member was a walking control group for the human species, their biology a snapshot from a different point in time and space. Extracting this treasure, however, required a new discipline, data archaeology. The ship's computer systems, cutting edge at launch, were now prehistoric. Storage formats were obsolete, operating systems unintelligible, and physical drives degraded. Teams of specialist engineers and linguists worked with the crew to painstakingly resurrect these systems. building emulators to read the ancient code, often relying on the crew's own memories of password protocols and file structures. It was a race against digital entropy, a delicate process of recovering whispers from a silent age. One scientist, a leading temporal physicist, summarized the value with quiet awe. She noted, "We can build models of the universe. We can predict what a near-light-speed journey should look like. But the Pilgrim is not a model, it is a receipt. It is the universe's own logbook entry for that specific trip. We can run 10,000 simulations, but we only have one actual measurement of reality from that unique vantage point. That is irreplaceable." This statement hangs in the air, leading to a reflective and difficult question. Does the immense, accidental scientific value of their voyage justify its profound human cost? The crew did not sign up to be lab rats in a centuries-long experiment. They signed up to explore, yet in their exploration, they became the experiment. Their lived time, their loneliness, their loss, became the currency that purchased a new understanding of the cosmos. Their journey was a laboratory, and every moment of heartache was a data point in a study on the human condition across relativistic time. The science they brought back would benefit generations to come, building a safer, more knowledgeable future. But that future was built, in part, on the silent, personal ledger of their sacrificed past. Does the expansion of knowledge for all forever balance the contraction of a single life into a data point? The Pilgrim's legacy is forever split, a vessel that carried both the deepest human sorrow and the most profound cosmic answers, leaving us to wonder if, in the cold equations of discovery, the two can ever truly be separated. The data recovered from the Pilgrim was a priceless gift, but its true value was a warning. The first return forced a stark, collective realization across the solar system. We could not send people to the stars again without a plan for bringing them home in time as well as in space. The experience of that crew became the foundational case study for a new discipline, relativistic ethics, which would reshape every future voyage from a one-way leap into an orchestrated passage. The old model of simply building a faster ship was dead. Now, the mission began centuries before launch, with society itself preparing to catch the travelers when they finally fell back out of the time stream. Policymakers and interstellar advocacy groups convened to draft a new framework, leading to the establishment of the Temporal Integration Agency. This permanent body's mandate was not to build engines but to build bridges. Its first and most profound innovation was the Temporal Liaison Program. Understanding that the deepest wound for the Pilgrim's crew was cultural alienation, the agency began recruiting volunteers from contemporary society to become deep time ambassadors. These individuals would undergo a decades-long immersion, not in a foreign language but in a past era. They would live as much as possible within recreated cultural environments of the launch century, mastering its idioms, its art, its social nuances, and its technology. Their sole purpose would be to serve as a living welcome party, a fluent translator of context who could meet the next returning crew not as a historian studying a specimen, but as a peer who speaks their emotional language. They would be the first friendly face in a future that otherwise feels foreign. Alongside these human bridges, the agency proposed the creation of chronological preserves. These would not be museums, but actively maintained cultural zones, districts within cities, or dedicated orbital habitats where the technology, architecture, and daily rhythms of a specific past era are preserved in functional detail. For a crew returning from a two-century journey, they could step directly into a neighborhood that feels like home, a place where the social rules are familiar and the devices work as they remember. This preserve would serve as a decompression chamber for the soul, allowing returnees to process their loss and acclimatize to the new era at their own pace, with the choice to engage with the broader future on their own terms. It is an admission that you cannot ask a human mind to jump 300 years in a single step. Technologically, the focus shifted from mere propulsion to temporal alignment. If the core of the paradox is the mismatch between subjective ship time and objective Earth time, then the solution is to bring those two timelines closer together. One radical approach involves advanced hibernation or suspended animation, not for the body alone, but for the conscious mind. The entire crew could enter a dreamless, timeless state for the bulk of the journey, only being revived for essential maintenance or emergencies. From their perspective, the trip to a distant star might feel like a series of brief, spaced-out awakenings over a few years while centuries pass externally. This would drastically reduce the cultural drift they experience, as their waking, social lives are not spent building a unique ship-bound society isolated from Earth's evolution. An even more speculative solution lies in mind uploading or cognitive patterning. Here, the crew's consciousnesses would be scanned and transferred to a secure digital medium at the start of the voyage. The physical ship, controlled by artificial intelligence, would make the journey unmanned. Upon arrival at the destination or upon return to Earth, the crew's patterns would be reinstantiated into biological or synthetic bodies. In this model, the crew subjectively experiences no travel time at all. They close their eyes in one century and open them in another, with their memories and identities perfectly intact, having skipped the lonely middle passage entirely. The philosophical and ethical debates around such a technology are immense, questioning the very nature of self and continuity, but it represents a direct engineering solution to the psychological toll of time dilation. Perhaps the most profound shift would be a social compact between the travelers and those who stay. Future missions might operate under a mutual treaty, where the staying society agrees to deliberately slow the rate of disruptive cultural change along designated explorer corridors. This does not mean stagnation, but a conscious stewardship of cultural continuity in key areas like language fundamentals, symbolic communication, and core social institutions. It is a promise from Earth: we will ensure there is still a recognizable thread for you to grasp when you return. In exchange, the explorers agree to carry dense cultural updates in compressed formats to be studied during their journey, so they are not returning to a complete unknown. This turns the voyage from a solitary exile into a sustained, if delayed, dialogue. An illustrative document from this new era might be the charter for the second major starship, the Wayfarer. Its technical specifications are matched in volume by its temporal integration annex. The annex mandates that 10% of its crew are temporal liaisons from the launch era, who will remain awake in shifts to monitor cultural transmissions. It requires the establishment of a chronological preserve at its planned return port, construction to begin 50 years before its estimated homecoming. It includes legal clauses that automatically adjust the crew's financial trusts and citizenship status through pre-negotiated formulas, avoiding the bitter legal battles of the first return. The Wayfarer is not just a ship, it is a treaty, a social experiment wrapped in a hull. All of this leads to a reflective question that hangs over every new blueprint. In our quest to master the physics of time travel, to mitigate its paradoxes with better technology and smarter policy, what are we trying to preserve? Is the goal simply to deliver a biologically intact human to a future date? Or is it to deliver a person who still feels meaningfully connected to the flow of human story? The first return taught us that the greatest danger is not the void of space, but the void of context. The new protocols are not just logistical fixes. They are an attempt to build a rope long enough and strong enough to tether a human heart across centuries. They acknowledge a fundamental truth: we are not just explorers of space. We are creatures of time, and to send someone on a journey that breaks their bond with time is to risk returning a stranger, even to themselves. The first crew's lonely homecoming was not an endpoint, but a painful, necessary lesson. It marked the end of our innocence about the stars and the beginning of our maturity in learning how to truly bring our people home. The equations of relativity are written in the language of mathematics, but their true story is told in the grammar of the human heart. We began with a simple, terrifying premise, returning home to a future that has forgotten you, and followed its thread through every layer of what makes us who we are. We saw time stretch in the engines of a starship and compress in the final message from a loved one. We watched identity unravel in a courtroom from another epoch and faith grapple with a universe where the soul's clock ticks at a different rate. This is the true shape of the time dilation paradox. It is not a puzzle to be solved, but a mirror held up to our deepest values, asking what we are willing to sacrifice on the altar of discovery. The voyage to the stars demands more than faster-than-light dreams. It requires a wisdom that travels across centuries. We must engineer not just propulsion, but compassion, designing social structures as carefully as radiation shields, building legal frameworks that stretch like time itself, and nurturing a culture that remembers how to welcome its own ghosts home. The great cost is measured not in light years, but in lost shared moments, in the silent erosion of context that turns a pioneer into a living artifact. As Carl Sagan so beautifully observed, the sky does call to us with a powerful, irresistible voice. Yet after understanding this paradox, we hear that call differently. It is a siren song that promises knowledge and new horizons, but carries the undertone of a profound and permanent farewell. To answer it with integrity, we must go forward with our eyes wide open, honoring both the courage to leave and the profound weight of what is left behind. This exploration is ultimately a reminder, etched in the laws of physics, to cherish the fragile, shared present we inhabit now. It is the only timeline we are all guaranteed to experience together. If these visions of humanity's future on the cosmic stage have captivated your imagination, consider subscribing for more journeys to the edge of what's possible. And we leave you with this question, born from every story we've shared. When the boarding call echoes through the launch bay and the stars gleam with promise, would you step onto that ship knowing the paradox awaits?